I knew my marriage was over the moment I saw the black cake in the middle of the room. Across the top, in white frosting, were 3 words, "R.I.P. our marriage." I stood in the doorway, still carrying the weight I had gained after giving birth to our son 6 months earlier. I thought Daniel had invited me there for our anniversary. I thought maybe, after months of cold looks and cruel comments, he wanted to fix us. But everyone was dressed in black. Our wedding photo was covered with a funeral veil, and my husband was standing beside it with a glass of champagne in his hand. He smiled at the room and said, "Tonight, we say goodbye to the woman I married, because she died the day she let herself become this." Then he pointed at my body. People laughed. My mother-in-law walked up to me, handed me a black veil, and whispered, "Wear it. At least pretend to respect the woman my son lost." I couldn't breathe. Then the door opened behind me. Vanessa walked in. My best friend. The woman who held my hand after I gave birth. The woman who told me I was still beautiful. She was wearing a white dress. Daniel took her hand and announced, "This is the woman who gave me a reason to start over." That night, they didn't just bury my marriage. They tried to bury me. But 1 year later, when I walked into that gala, thinner, stronger, richer, and more beautiful than Daniel had ever seen me, he finally begged for the woman he buried. Before Daniel held a funeral for our marriage, he buried me slowly in smaller ways. It started after I gave birth to our son, Noah. I did not recognize my body anymore, but not because I hated it. I did not recognize it because it had survived something Daniel never cared to understand. My stomach was softer. My face was rounder. My hips were wider. My old clothes stayed folded in the back of the closet like evidence from another life. Every night, while Daniel slept or pretended to sleep, I was the one walking the hallway with Noah against my chest, whispering to him at 3 a.m, feeding him, changing him, rocking him until my arms went numb. I forgot meals. I forgot showers. I forgot what it felt like to sleep more than 2 hours at a time. But Daniel only noticed one thing. The weight. At first, he tried to make his cruelty sound like concern. He would stand behind me while I looked in the mirror and say, "You should start taking care of yourself again." Then it became, most women try harder after having a baby. Then, one night, when I reached for his hand in bed, he pulled away and said, "I just don't feel attracted to you anymore." I lay there beside him, staring at the ceiling, pretending those words had not split me open. I told myself he was tired. I told myself fatherhood had changed him. I told myself if I lost a little weight, wore makeup again, smiled more, complained less, maybe my husband would come back to me. So I tried. I bought loose dresses that hid my stomach. I watched videos about postpartum workouts while Noah slept on my chest. I skipped dessert at family dinners while Daniel's mother, Margaret, watched me like she was counting every bite. But nothing was ever enough. If I dressed up, Daniel said I looked desperate. If I wore comfortable clothes, he said I had given up. If I cried, he said I was unstable. If I stayed quiet, he said I was cold. The only person who seemed to understand me was Vanessa, my best friend. She came over with coffee, held Noah, folded laundry, and told me Daniel was just under pressure. She would sit beside me on the couch while I cried and say, "You're still beautiful, Emma. Don't let anyone make you feel less than that." I believed her because I needed to believe someone was still on my side. Vanessa had stood beside me on my wedding day. She had fixed my veil, cried during my vows, and called Daniel lucky. After Noah was born, she was at the hospital with flowers and a soft pink blanket, telling me I looked amazing even when I felt like I had been broken and stitched back together wrong. I trusted her so much that when Daniel started coming home late, I told Vanessa before I told anyone else. When I found a lipstick stain on his shirt collar, she told me I was probably imagining things because I was exhausted. When I noticed he smiled at his phone but stopped smiling at me, she told me not to ruin my marriage with insecurity. What I did not know was that every tear I cried into Vanessa's shoulder became something she carried back to Daniel. Every fear I confessed became a weapon. Every private insecurity became a joke between them. Later, I would find the messages. Daniel telling her I was too big to take anywhere. Vanessa replying, then stop taking her. Daniel saying he felt trapped with a woman who looked nothing like the wife he married. Vanessa answering, maybe you married the wrong woman. But back then, I still thought she was my friend. I still thought Daniel was a tired husband who had forgotten how to love me. I still thought Margaret was just a cruel mother-in-law who blamed me for not staying perfect after giving her a grandson. I did not understand that the three of them had already started building a new life around my absence. Vanessa was not helping me recover. She was learning my routine. She knew when I slept. She knew where I kept Noah's documents. She knew which days Daniel and I fought. She knew exactly how weak I felt, because I had handed her the map to every wound I had. And while I was trying to become the woman Daniel wanted again, Daniel was planning a public goodbye to the woman he claimed I used to be. Vanessa did not walk into my marriage like a thief in the night. She walked in smiling, carrying coffee, baby clothes, and just enough kindness to make me open the door wider every time. After Noah was born, she became the person everyone praised for helping me, while I became the woman everyone pitied for falling apart. She came over almost every afternoon, saying she wanted to give me a break, and I was too exhausted to question why my best friend suddenly knew where Daniel kept his shirts, how he liked his coffee, which side of the couch he preferred, and what time he usually came home. At first, I thought she was only trying to make my life easier. She would take Noah from my arms and say, "Go shower, Emma. You need to feel human again." She would fold the laundry, clean the kitchen, and tell Daniel how hard I had worked all day. But somehow, when Daniel looked at her, he did not look grateful to me. He looked relieved by her. It was like Vanessa had become the bright, easy part of our home, while I was the heavy, tired part everyone wanted to avoid. Margaret noticed it too, and instead of being ashamed, she encouraged it. She started saying things like, "Vanessa has such a natural way with the baby," or, "Some women keep their grace even under pressure." She always said it while looking at me, while my hair was messy, my shirt was stained with milk, and my body still looked like it belonged to a woman who had just survived childbirth. Daniel never defended me. He only smiled at Vanessa, laughed at her jokes, and thanked her for bringing some peace into the house. I wanted to scream that I was the one keeping that house alive. I was the one waking up before sunrise. I was the one holding Noah through fevers, colic, and sleepless nights. I was the one bleeding, healing, feeding, and breaking myself into smaller pieces so everyone else could stay comfortable. But all Daniel saw was a wife who had gained weight. All Margaret saw was a daughter-in-law who embarrassed her. And all Vanessa saw was an opening. The first time I felt something was truly wrong was the night Daniel came home with flowers. I was sitting on the couch, holding Noah against my chest after he had cried for almost 2 hours. My back hurt. My eyes burned. I had not eaten dinner. For one foolish second, when Daniel walked through the door with a bouquet in his hand, my heart lifted. I thought maybe he had remembered me. Maybe he had seen how hard I was trying. Maybe he was sorry. But he walked right past me and handed the flowers to Vanessa. "For everything you've done for us," he said. Vanessa looked at me before she took them, like she wanted to see if I would break. I almost did. She hugged him, and he let the hug last too long. Margaret smiled from the kitchen as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. That night, after Vanessa left, I asked Daniel if he still loved me. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "I love what we used to be." I asked him what that meant, and he looked at my body before he answered. "It means I miss my wife." Those 4 words hurt more than if he had said he hated me, because I was standing right in front of him. I was his wife. I was the mother of his child. But to Daniel, the woman he married had disappeared under the weight, the exhaustion, and the body he no longer wanted to touch. Vanessa knew exactly how to use that. She started telling me Daniel was just confused. She said men sometimes struggled after babies arrived. She told me not to be jealous, not to become insecure, not to push him away. And because I was lonely, because I was ashamed, because I wanted to believe someone still loved me enough to tell me the truth, I believed her. I told her things I should have kept locked inside my own chest. I told her I was scared Daniel found me disgusting. I told her I cried when I changed clothes because nothing fit right anymore. I told her I missed feeling beautiful. She held my hand and said, "You are beautiful." Then she went back to Daniel and repeated every word. Later, I would find the messages. Daniel saying, "She knows she's not attractive anymore." Vanessa replying, "Then stop pretending you still want her." Daniel writing, "I feel like I'm living with a stranger." Vanessa answering, "Maybe the woman you loved is already gone." But at the time, I still thought my best friend was trying to save my marriage, not replace me inside it. So when Daniel suddenly told me he wanted to plan an anniversary dinner, I almost cried from relief. He said we needed a fresh start. He said he wanted one night where we could remember what we used to mean to each other. He even told me to buy a dress, get my hair done, and let Vanessa help with the details because she was good at elegant things. I ignored the insult hidden inside that sentence. I ignored the way Vanessa smiled when he said it. I ignored the way Margaret suddenly offered to watch Noah that night, even though she usually acted like holding him was a favor I should beg for. I wanted the dinner to be real. I wanted my husband to look at me again and see more than the weight. So I bought a black dress that fit the body I had now, not the body Daniel kept mourning. I stood in front of the mirror and tried to convince myself that I still looked like a woman worth choosing. I did not know Daniel had chosen black for a reason. I did not know Vanessa had already picked out a white dress for herself. I did not know the guest list included his family, his friends, and the same people who had watched me disappear after giving birth. And I did not know that while I was trying to prepare for an anniversary dinner, my husband, my mother-in-law, and my best friend were preparing a funeral. The night of our anniversary dinner, I stood in my bedroom for almost 20 minutes trying to zip up the black dress. Not because it was too small, but because my hands would not stop shaking. It was the first dress I had bought for the body I had now instead of the body Daniel kept punishing me for losing. It was simple, soft around my waist, elegant enough that for one brief moment I almost recognized myself in the mirror. I fixed my hair, put on lipstick, and tried not to cry before I even left the house. Noah was sitting on the bed, kicking his little feet, watching me like I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I picked him up and pressed my face into his neck, breathing in that warm baby smell that had kept me alive through the worst months of my marriage. "Mommy's going to fix things tonight," I whispered, even though I did not know if I believed it. When Margaret arrived to watch him, she looked at me with a cold smile and said, "Black is a good choice." I thought she meant the dress was slimming. I almost thanked her. Now I know she was admiring how perfectly I had dressed for my own humiliation. Daniel barely looked at me when we left. He opened the car door, but not the way he used to when we were dating, with warmth or tenderness. He did it like a man performing a duty in public. During the drive, I tried to make conversation. I asked where we were going. He said it was a surprise. I asked if Vanessa would be there, since she had helped plan it. He smiled at the road and said, "She worked very hard on tonight." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten, but I forced myself to ignore it. I told myself not to ruin the evening with suspicion. I told myself this was the night Daniel might finally see me trying. When we pulled up to the restaurant, I realized it was the same place where we had held our wedding reception. For a second, my heart hurt in the sweetest way. I remembered walking through those doors in a white dress, my hand in Daniel's, believing I had been chosen for life. I remembered Vanessa standing beside me, crying as she toasted us. I remembered Margaret telling people her son had married a beautiful girl with a good family. Back then, I had been beautiful enough for all of them. Back then, my body was something they could display proudly. Daniel placed his hand on my lower back as we walked inside, and I almost leaned into it before I noticed there was no affection in his touch. He was guiding me, not holding me. The hostess did not smile when she saw me. She looked quickly at Daniel, then down at a clipboard, as if she already knew something I did not. "Your party is ready," she said softly. Party. That word should have comforted me, but instead it felt wrong. Daniel led me down the private hallway toward the banquet room, and with every step, the air seemed to grow colder. There was no music coming from behind the doors. No laughter. No warm light. Just a strange, heavy silence, the kind of silence that waits before bad news is delivered. I stopped walking. "Daniel," I said, "what is this?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for 1 second I saw something in his eyes that almost looked like excitement. Not love. Not regret. Excitement. Like he had been waiting for this part. He opened the doors before I could ask another question. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. The room was decorated in black. Black tablecloths. Black candles. Black ribbons tied around white flowers. Everyone was dressed like they had come to mourn someone. Daniel's friends stood near the bar with champagne glasses. His relatives sat at the tables, whispering. Margaret was already inside, holding Noah in her arms, though she had promised to keep him at home. My wedding photo stood on an easel near the center of the room, covered with a thin black veil. And beside it, on the main table, was a black cake with white frosting across the top. Rip our marriage. For a moment, I could not move. I could not speak. I could not even breathe. My first thought was that there had been a mistake, that we had walked into someone else's event, someone else's cruelty, someone else's nightmare. But then I saw Vanessa standing near the back of the room, hidden partly in the shadows, wearing white. Not cream. Not silver. White. The kind of white a woman wears when she wants everyone to see her as the beginning of something. Her eyes met mine, and she did not look sorry. She looked ready. Daniel stepped away from me and walked toward the cake, leaving me alone in the doorway while every face in the room turned in my direction. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked amused. Margaret bounced Noah gently against her shoulder, smiling as if my son was not witnessing the most humiliating moment of my life. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a horrible joke, to say anything that would make the room become normal again. Instead, he picked up a glass of champagne, tapped it with a knife, and waited until every whisper died. Then he looked straight at me and smiled. That was when I understood. This was not an anniversary dinner. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not Vanessa trying to help plan something elegant. This was a performance. And I had been invited only because every funeral needs a body. Daniel lifted his champagne glass as if he were about to give a toast at a wedding, and somehow that made everything worse. His suit was perfect. His smile was calm. His voice did not shake. Mine would have shattered if I had tried to speak, but Daniel looked completely comfortable standing in front of the black cake, our veiled wedding photo, and a room full of people who had come to watch him humiliate his wife. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. "I know this is not the kind of anniversary dinner people expected, but sometimes the truth deserves a ceremony." A few people laughed nervously. I looked around the room, searching for one face that looked horrified enough to help me. No one moved. Some stared into their drinks. Some watched me with pity. Others watched with the hungry curiosity people have when someone else's pain becomes entertainment. Daniel turned toward our wedding photo, still covered in black fabric, and sighed as if he were grieving. "Years ago, I married a woman I was proud to stand beside. She was beautiful, confident, full of life. She cared about herself. She cared about how she represented this family." He paused, then looked at me. "But that woman is gone." My throat tightened. I wanted to say, "I am right here." I wanted to remind him that the woman he was mourning was the same woman who had carried his child, paid bills when his business was failing, sat beside him through every setback, and loved him even when he gave me less and less to love. But before I could open my mouth, Daniel continued. "After Noah was born, I waited. I was patient. I told myself she would come back. I told myself the woman I married was somewhere under all of this." He waved his hand toward my body, not even trying to hide what he meant. Heat rushed to my face. Someone near the bar snickered. Margaret smiled like she had been waiting years to hear her son say those words out loud. Daniel's voice grew softer, crueler, more theatrical. But at some point, a man has to stop pretending. He has to stop living beside someone who let herself disappear and still expects to be treated like nothing changed. I felt every word land on me in front of that room. Let herself disappear. As if I had not disappeared because I was feeding his son. As if I had not lost pieces of myself while keeping our baby alive. As if my body had become a crime because it no longer pleased him. I stepped forward, barely able to hear myself over the pounding in my ears. Daniel, stop. He looked at me with fake sadness. This is exactly what I mean, Emma. You always make it emotional. You never take responsibility. Margaret walked toward me then, holding a black veil folded over her arm. She moved slowly, like she was part of the performance. When she reached me, she placed the veil against my chest and said loud enough for the front tables to hear, "Wear it. At least tonight, show some respect for the woman my son lost." My fingers curled around the fabric, not because I wanted it, but because my body did not know what else to do. I looked down at the veil, then back at my mother-in-law. "I gave him a child," I whispered. Margaret's eyes hardened. "And then you gave up on yourself." That was when the room stopped being silent. A few people laughed openly now. Someone muttered, "That's harsh," but no one stood up. No one told her she was wrong. No one told Daniel he was cruel. I looked toward Noah, still in Margaret's arms, his tiny face turned against her shoulder, too young to understand that his mother was being torn apart 10 feet away from him. I tried to move toward him, but Daniel lifted one hand. "Don't make this worse," he said. "You brought him here?" My voice cracked. "You brought our son to this?" Daniel's expression did not change. He should be surrounded by people who care about the kind of home he grows up in. I am his mother. "You are unstable," Margaret snapped. "You are emotional. You are careless with your health. You cry constantly. You barely keep yourself together. Do you really think that is what a child needs?" I stared at her, stunned by how easily she turned exhaustion into guilt, motherhood into weakness, pain into evidence. Then Daniel placed his glass down and reached for a small black folder beside the cake. He opened it slowly, almost elegantly, and took out a stack of papers. My stomach dropped before I even saw the words. Divorce petition. Custody request. Property division. He had not invited me there to talk. He had invited me there to break me in front of witnesses. Daniel held the papers out to me. "Sign tonight," he said. "Don't drag this out. Don't make Noah grow up watching us fight. Let him have a healthy home." I looked at the papers, then at Vanessa. She was still standing near the back, glowing in that white dress, her hands folded in front of her like she was a bride waiting for her turn. When our eyes met, she tilted her head with that soft, fake pity I knew so well. Then she walked forward. Every step she took made the room feel smaller. "Emma," she said gently, as if we were still friends, as if she had any right to speak my name with tenderness. "Maybe this is for the best. Daniel has been suffering too." I almost laughed because the pain was so sharp it felt unreal. "Daniel has been suffering?" Vanessa glanced at him, then back at me. "He deserves peace. Noah deserves stability. And you deserve time to work on yourself without the pressure of trying to be a wife." There it was. The final insult, wrapped in concern. I looked at the woman who had held my hand in the hospital, who had brought me soup, who had watched me bleed through the hardest months of my life, and I realized she had not been comforting me. She had been studying me. Learning how to stand where I stood. Learning how to hold my child, speak to my husband, charm my mother-in-law, and look at my ruined marriage like an empty chair she had already claimed. Daniel reached for her hand. He did not hide it. He wanted me to see it. He wanted everyone to see it. Vanessa reminded me what it feels like to be with a woman who still cares about being wanted, he said. A sound came out of me then, small and broken, but I refused to let it become a sob. I looked at the papers in his hand, then at the cake behind him. Rip our marriage. The room waited. Daniel waited. Margaret waited. Vanessa waited. They all thought shame would make me obedient. They thought if they buried me publicly enough, I would climb into the grave myself and call it dignity. I reached for the papers. Daniel's mouth twitched like he had one. For 1 second, I let him believe it. Then I tore them in half. The sound was not loud, but it cut through the room sharper than a scream. Daniel's face changed. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Margaret clutched Noah tighter. I dropped the torn papers onto the black cake, right over the white frosting that said our marriage was dead, and for the first time that night, my voice did not shake. You can bury this marriage, I said. But you do not get to bury me with it. For 1 second after I tore the papers, the room went completely still. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even Daniel looked as if he had forgotten how to breathe. Pieces of the divorce petition lay scattered across the black cake, sticking to the frosting like dirty snow. I should have felt powerful. I should have felt proud. But all I could think about was Noah, still in Margaret's arms, still too close to people who were willing to use him as a prop in their cruelty. I stepped toward my son. Give him to me, I said. Margaret pulled him back immediately, pressing his tiny body against her chest as if I were a stranger trying to steal him. Do not hand her that baby, she said sharply. She is not thinking clearly. Daniel's face hardened. The shock disappeared, replaced by something colder and more dangerous. He was not embarrassed anymore. He was angry because I had ruined the ending he had written for me. Emma, he said, low and controlled, you need to calm down. I almost laughed. Calm down. He had invited me to my own public humiliation. He had stood in front of our family, pointed at my body, introduced my best friend as his new beginning, handed me divorce papers beside a funeral cake, and now he wanted me to look calm so he could call himself reasonable. I am calm, I said. I want my son. Vanessa moved closer to Daniel and placed one hand on his arm, playing frightened so beautifully that for a moment I understood how easy it must have been for him to choose her lie over my truth. Daniel, she whispered, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, maybe we should call someone. She's scaring me. That was when I saw the trap fully. They did not just want to humiliate me. They wanted me to react. They wanted tears, shaking hands, a raised voice, anything they could point to later and say, see? She is unstable. She cannot control herself. She should not have custody. My heart started pounding, but I forced my voice lower. Vanessa, do not do this. She flinched as if I had threatened her. I'm only trying to protect Noah. The words hit me harder than Daniel's speech. Protect Noah from what? From the mother who had fed him through fever? From the woman who stayed awake while Daniel slept? From the body that carried him, delivered him, and held him every night when no one else came? I reached for Noah again, slower this time, palms open. Margaret, give me my baby. Margaret looked past me toward Daniel. This is exactly why we were worried. Daniel nodded once, and 2 security guards stepped into the room. I had not even noticed them before. They had been waiting near the side door, like another part of the performance. My stomach dropped. Daniel had planned for this too. He had planned for me to refuse. He had planned for me to break. He had planned for someone to drag me out while everyone watched. Mrs. Carter, one of the guards said gently, we need you to step outside. I shook my head. No. Not without my son. Daniel raised his voice just enough for the room to hear. She is not leaving with Noah tonight. The words turned my blood cold. You don't get to decide that. Actually, he said, lifting his chin, until we speak with my attorney tomorrow, I think it's best that Noah stays with me and my mother. He is 6 months old, I said. He needs me. Margaret scoffed. He needs stability. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward me, and for the first time all night, I saw something beneath the softness. Not guilt. Satisfaction. She had wanted my chair, my home, my husband, and now she was standing close enough to my baby to imagine taking him too. The security guard touched my arm. I pulled away, not violently, not wildly, just enough to keep standing where I was. But Vanessa gasped as if I had shoved someone. "Daniel, please," she cried. "This is getting out of control." Daniel stepped forward and pointed at me. "You see? This is what I have been dealing with for months." I looked around the room again, desperate for one person to say the obvious truth. That I was a mother trying to reach her child. That I had not threatened anyone. That they had cornered me, mocked me, and then called my pain dangerous. But no one stood up. The same people who had toasted at my wedding now watched me being erased from my own family. One of Daniel's cousins lifted his phone. Another guest turned away, pretending not to see. Margaret began bouncing Noah faster, and he started to cry. That sound tore through me. Every instinct in my body moved toward him. "Noah," I whispered, and then louder, "Noah, Mommy's here." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Get her out." The guards took my arms. I fought the urge to scream because I knew that was what they wanted. I fought the urge to claw my way to my child because they would use that too. So I locked my eyes on Noah and let them pull me backward, every step feeling like something being ripped out of my chest. "I am his mother," I said, over and over, not to Daniel, not to Margaret, not to the room, but to myself, because I was terrified that if I stopped saying it, they would somehow make it untrue. At the doorway, I looked back one last time. Daniel stood beside Vanessa now, her white dress glowing against the black decorations. Margaret held my crying son. The torn divorce papers were still on the cake. And above all of it, those 3 words stared back at me. "Rip our marriage." Then the doors closed, and the sound of Noah crying became muffled behind them. Outside, the hallway was bright and empty, almost cruelly normal. The guards released me near the front entrance like I was a drunk guest who had caused a scene, not a mother who had just been dragged away from her baby. I stood there shaking, one hand pressed against my stomach, trying not to collapse. Through the glass doors of the banquet room, I could still see them. Daniel picked up a knife and cut into the black cake. Vanessa stood beside him, smiling too softly. Margaret rocked Noah near the corner, keeping her body turned away from me so I could not even see his face. Someone raised a glass. The party continued. My funeral continued without me. I pressed my palm against the glass, and for the first time that night, I let myself cry. Not because Daniel did not love me. That pain had already been killing me for months. I cried because I finally understood that they were not trying to end a marriage. They were trying to remove me from my own life and make everyone believe I had deserved it. A few minutes later, Daniel came out alone. He did not look sorry. He looked annoyed, as if my heartbreak had become an inconvenience. "Go home, Emma," he said. "Noah is staying with my mother tonight." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "You cannot keep my son from me." "Watch me," he said. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. "And after the way you acted tonight, no judge is going to question why I did." He turned and walked back inside, leaving me outside in the cold with my black dress, my empty arms, and the first clear understanding that the man I had married was not just cruel. He was prepared. That night, I did not go home right away. I sat on the curb outside the restaurant because my legs would not carry me any farther. Cars passed. People laughed on the sidewalk. Somewhere inside, my husband and my best friend were celebrating the life they thought they had stolen from me. I looked at my reflection in the restaurant window, swollen-eyed, shaking, humiliated, still trapped in the body they had mocked, and I almost believed them. Almost. Then I saw the black veil Margaret had forced into my hands lying beside me on the pavement. I picked it up, folded it once, and held it against my chest. If they wanted a funeral, I would give them one. But not for my body. Not for my worth. Not for the mother they tried to erase. That night, the woman who begged Daniel to love her died. And the woman who would take everything back opened her eyes. I do not remember calling my Aunt Claire. I only remember hearing her voice through the phone while I sat on the curb outside the restaurant, my black dress wrinkled, my makeup ruined, the veil still clutched in my fist like proof that the night had really happened. Claire had been a family attorney for 30 years before she retired, and she had never liked Daniel. She had never said much, but every time he spoke over me at dinner or made a joke at my expense, I would see her watching him with quiet, careful eyes. When she arrived, she did not ask me why I was crying. She did not tell me to calm down. She got out of the car, wrapped her coat around my shoulders, looked through the restaurant window at the black decorations, the cake, Vanessa's white dress, and my mother-in-law holding my son, and said, "Do not say another word to him without a lawyer." I broke then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. I just folded into her arms and whispered, "They took Noah." Claire held me tighter and said, "Then we take him back." Those words were the first solid thing I had touched all night. She drove me to her house, not mine, because Daniel had already texted that I should not come home until I was ready to behave rationally. The message was so clean, so careful, so different from the cruelty I had just survived, that I understood immediately what he was doing. He was building a record. He wanted me angry. He wanted me desperate. He wanted me to send 50 messages, pound on the door, scream in the driveway, do anything that would help him turn me into the unstable woman he had described in that room. Claire took my phone from my trembling hands and placed it on the kitchen table. "Tonight," she said, "you are not his wife. You are a case. And we are going to make sure he does not get to write the story." I hated how cold that sounded, but I needed it. Because if I let myself be only a mother with empty arms, would have driven straight back to that restaurant and given Daniel exactly what he wanted. Instead, Claire made tea I could not drink, opened her laptop, and began asking questions like she was pulling me out of the water, one answer at a time. Who was there? Who saw the papers? Who brought Noah? Did anyone record it? Was there security? Did the restaurant have cameras? At first, I said I did not know. Then I remembered Daniel's cousin holding up his phone. I remembered the hostess looking at me like she already knew. I remembered the small black dome camera in the hallway outside the banquet room, the one Daniel had ignored because men like him always believe cruelty is safe when enough people agree to look away. Claire called the restaurant before midnight. The manager refused to release anything without a formal request, but his voice changed when Claire explained that an infant had been withheld from his mother during an attempted coerced signing of divorce and custody documents. By morning, we had the name of the security company. By noon, Claire had contacted a practicing attorney she trusted. By 3, my cousin Lily called me crying. She had been late to the dinner and had recorded almost everything from the side entrance because she thought, at first, that Daniel was making some kind of twisted joke. Her video showed the cake. It showed Daniel pointing at my body. It showed Margaret handing me the black veil. It showed Vanessa in white. It showed the divorce papers. It showed me reaching for Noah with open hands before the guards dragged me out. For the first time since the doors closed between me and my son, I could breathe. Not because the pain was gone, but because the truth had survived the room. Daniel could call me unstable, emotional, bitter, dramatic, whatever he wanted. The camera did not care about his version. The video did not soften his voice or hide Vanessa's smile. It did not turn my tears into violence. It showed exactly what they had done. That evening, Claire's attorney helped me file an emergency motion. I learned words I never wanted to know: temporary custody, parental interference, coercive control, reputational harm, financial disclosure. I signed papers with hands that still shook, but this time no one was forcing them into my palm beside a funeral cake. This time, every signature was a step back toward my child. Daniel called 17 times after he was served. I did not answer. Then he texted, "You are making this worse for yourself." Claire read it, smiled without humor, and printed it. Margaret left a voicemail saying I should be ashamed for tearing a family apart over one difficult evening. Vanessa sent one message, "I hope one day you understand we were trying to help." I stared at those words for a long time. Help. She had used that word when she held my baby. She had used it when she folded my laundry, when she listened to me cry, when she told me I was still beautiful while carrying my wounds back to my husband like gifts. I deleted her name from my favorites and changed my locks on every account she had ever known the password to. 2 days later, I saw Noah again in a supervised exchange room that smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. Margaret brought him in with her mouth tight and her eyes full of hate. Daniel was not there. Vanessa was not there. Just my baby, red-cheeked and sleepy, wearing the little blue sweater I had packed in his diaper bag before the dinner because I thought his grandmother was only babysitting him for a few hours. The second he saw me, his face changed. His tiny body leaned forward before Margaret could stop him. "Give him to her," the caseworker said. Margaret hesitated just long enough for everyone to notice, then placed him in my arms like she was surrendering property, not returning a child to his mother. Noah grabbed my dress and buried his face in my chest. I held him so tightly I was afraid I would disappear if I let go. I whispered, "Mommy's here," again and again, until I realized I was not only saying it to him. I was saying it to the part of myself Daniel had tried to erase. That night, after Noah fell asleep beside me in Claire's guest room, I stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at me was swollen from crying. Her hair was flat. Her skin looked gray. Her body was still the body Daniel had pointed at in front of a room full of people. For the first time, I did not insult her. I did not grab at her stomach or turn sideways in shame. I looked at her and thought, "You survived. Not beautifully. Not gracefully. Not in a way Daniel could admire. But I had survived childbirth, betrayal, humiliation, and the sound of my son crying behind closed doors. I had survived the funeral they threw for me. And survival was not going to be the end of my story. The next morning, I made 3 appointments. One with my lawyer. One with a therapist who specialized in postpartum trauma. And one with a doctor, not because Daniel had convinced me my body was disgusting, but because I was tired of living inside a body I only treated as evidence of failure. I did not want revenge to be the only thing that pulled me out of bed. I wanted health. I wanted strength. I wanted to walk into a room without shrinking. I wanted to look in a mirror and see a woman, not a wound. So I made a promise to myself while Noah slept in the next room and the black veil lay folded at the bottom of my bag. I would get my son back fully. I would get my money back. I would get my name back. And then, slowly, privately, painfully, I would get myself back too. Not for Daniel. Not for Vanessa. Not so anyone could say I had finally become worthy again. I was already worthy when I was crying on that curb. I was already worthy when my dress did not hide my stomach. I was already worthy when they laughed. But now I was going to become someone they could no longer reach. The first few weeks after I got Noah back were not beautiful. They were not the kind of transformation people clap for in movies, where a woman wakes up one morning, throws away her old clothes, and becomes unrecognizable by sunset. Mine started with court dates, therapy appointments, bottles at midnight, and mornings when I had to force myself out of bed because no one needed me even when I did not know how to need myself. I did not wake up suddenly strong. I woke up tired, swollen-eyed, scared, and angry, but I woke up anyway. That became my first victory. At first, my goals were small. Drink water before coffee. Eat something real before noon. Walk around the block with Noah in his stroller. Answer 1 email. Open 1 bill. Fold 1 basket of laundry. I had spent so long trying to become smaller for Daniel that I did not know how to take up space in my own life anymore. My therapist helped me understand that Daniel had not just mocked my body. He had trained me to see myself through his disgust. Every mirror became his eyes. Every meal became his judgment. Every dress became a test I was already failing. So I stopped trying to become the woman Daniel wanted and started trying to become the woman Noah deserved to see. Not perfect. Not thin enough to be forgiven. Just alive, steady, and no longer ashamed to exist. My doctor helped me fix what I had ignored for months: the exhaustion, the hormone changes, the pain I kept dismissing because Daniel had convinced me that discomfort was just the price of being a woman who had let herself go. I learned to eat to heal instead of punish myself. I learned to move my body because it deserved strength, not because it owed anyone beauty. At first, I could only walk 10 minutes before my legs ached and Noah needed to be picked up. Then 10 minutes became 20. 20 became morning walks through the park. Then I joined a small women's fitness class where no one laughed at me, no one stared at my stomach, and no one asked how fast I planned to lose weight. They just asked my name. That alone nearly made me cry. Slowly, my body began to change, but the first thing that came back was not my waist. It was my posture. I stopped looking down when I entered a room. I stopped apologizing when I moved past people. I stopped choosing clothes that punished me for not fitting into my old life. I bought jeans that fit, dresses that shaped me instead of hiding me, colors Daniel once said were too confident for a mother. I cut my hair shorter, softer around my face. I learned how to do my makeup in 10 minutes while Noah played with plastic cups on the bathroom floor. Some mornings, he would look up at me, clap his little hands, and laugh as if I had performed magic just by putting on lipstick. Those moments saved me. Because to Daniel, I had been a body that failed him. To Noah, I was light. I was warmth. I was the voice that came when he cried. I was home. While I was rebuilding myself, Claire helped me rebuild my finances. Daniel had always liked telling people he was the provider, but the truth looked different on paper. The down payment on our house had come from the trust my father left me. The first investment in Daniel's business had come from my savings. Even the restaurant bills and the private family events he loved using to impress people had often been paid from accounts he had access to because I trusted him. Trust, I learned, can look a lot like stupidity after someone weaponizes it. My lawyer traced transfers Daniel thought I would never notice. Payments to Vanessa. Hotel charges. Jewelry. A lease deposit for an apartment he swore he had never rented. I stopped crying every time new evidence appeared. Eventually, each document felt less like a betrayal and more like a brick. Brick by brick, I was building the wall he would one day crash into. By the 4th month, the emergency custody order had become a stronger temporary arrangement in my favor. Daniel still had visitation, but it was supervised after the court reviewed the video from the funeral dinner and the messages between him and Vanessa. He hated that. He hated sitting in a room with a caseworker while Noah reached for me at the end of every visit. He hated that he could no longer control the story. Most of all, he hated that I no longer answered his insults. When he texted, "You're only doing this because you're bitter," I sent it to my lawyer. When Margaret left voicemails calling me selfish, I saved them. When Vanessa wrote, "Daniel is miserable because of you," I blocked her. Silence became one of my favorite weapons. Daniel had always known how to fight the woman who begged. He did not know what to do with the woman who documented. By the 6th month, something in me had shifted so deeply that even Claire noticed. One morning, she watched me walk into her kitchen wearing a fitted green dress, my hair still damp, Noah balanced on my hip, my laptop under one arm, and she smiled like she was seeing someone return from the dead. "There she is," she said. I laughed because I knew exactly what she meant. Not the old Emma. Not the woman Daniel claimed he had lost. Someone better. Someone sharper. Someone who had been burned clean of the need to be chosen by people who only loved her when she was easy to display. I went back to work part-time first, then full-time, consulting for small businesses that needed help with branding and operations. It was work I had done quietly for Daniel for years while he took credit in public. The difference was that now I charged for it. My first client was a bakery owner who needed help turning her local shop into an online brand. My second was a women-owned fitness studio. My third came from a referral, then the fourth, then the fifth. By the 9th month, I had my own small consulting agency, a new bank account Daniel could not touch, and a waiting list of clients who respected my time more than my own husband ever had. I was not rich overnight. I did not become some perfect revenge fantasy with diamonds and a mansion by summer. But I became stable. Then comfortable. Then independent. And independence changed my face more than weight loss ever could. People talk about glow-ups like they happen in the mirror, but mine happened in my calendar, my bank statements, my custody agreement, my medical records, my closet, my kitchen, my locked front door, and the way I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. My body did change. I lost weight slowly, safely, without starving myself, without hating myself into obedience. My cheeks became more defined. My skin brightened. My steps became lighter. My old exhaustion faded from my eyes. But I was still not the woman Daniel had married, and I no longer wanted to be. That woman had loved him more than she loved herself. This one knew better. Near the end of that first year, an invitation arrived in my email for a charity gala hosted by the same business circle Daniel had spent years trying to impress. I almost deleted it until I saw the name of the event sponsor. One of my biggest clients had nominated me as a featured speaker for women rebuilding after financial and emotional abuse. The gala would be held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same hotel where Daniel had once told me I embarrassed him because I looked too tired and too big beside his colleagues. I stared at the invitation for a long time, feeling the old fear rise first. Then something else came after it. Not revenge exactly. Recognition. A year earlier, Daniel had stood in a room dressed in black and told everyone the woman he married was dead. Now I had a chance to walk into another room, not as his wife, not as his victim, not as the woman in the black dress at the funeral cake, but as myself. I bought a deep red gown for the gala, elegant and fitted, the kind of dress I would have once held up to my body and said, "Not for me." This time, I said nothing. I tried it on, zipped it slowly, and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was not thin enough for Daniel's approval. She was not young enough to undo childbirth. She was not untouched by grief. But she was beautiful. Not because she had erased what happened to her, but because she had survived it without letting it make her cruel. Noah sat on the bed behind me, clapping at his reflection in the mirror, and I laughed so hard my eyes filled with tears. Claire stood in the doorway, holding the black veil from that night. I had kept it, not because I wanted to remember the humiliation, but because I wanted proof that I had outlived it. She asked if I wanted to throw it away before the gala. I took it from her, folded it once, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my dresser. "Not yet," I said. "Let it watch." Because the woman they buried was not gone. She had roots now. And she was about to bloom in front of everyone who thought she would stay underground. The night of the gala, I arrived at the Grand Meridian Hotel 10 minutes late on purpose. A year earlier, I would have rushed, apologized, and entered quietly, afraid of being noticed for the wrong reasons. That night, I sat in the back of the car for 1 extra minute, breathing slowly while the hotel lights reflected across the window like gold. My red gown fit my body like it had been made for the woman I had become, not the woman Daniel used to criticize. My hair was swept back softly from my face. My makeup was clean, elegant, nothing desperate, nothing begging. I wore small diamond earrings I had bought for myself after signing my first major client, and on my left hand, where my wedding ring used to be, there was nothing. No mark. No weight. No proof that I had ever belonged to a man who mistook possession for love. Claire squeezed my hand before I stepped out. "Remember," she said, "you are not walking in there to prove anything to him." I smiled because she was right. I was not there for Daniel. But a part of me, honest and human and still scarred, wanted him to see exactly what he had failed to destroy. The ballroom looked nothing like the room where he had held my funeral. This room was bright, warm, filled with crystal chandeliers, white flowers, gold table settings, and people speaking in polished voices over champagne. There were no black candles, no veiled wedding photos, no cake with my humiliation written across it. This was not a room built to bury me. This was a room I had earned my way into. When I stepped through the entrance, the conversations closest to me softened, then paused. Not because people recognized me as Daniel's ex-wife, but because I looked like someone who belonged there. That was new. For years, I had entered rooms as Daniel's wife, then as Daniel's embarrassment, then as Daniel's problem. That night, I entered as Emma Carter, founder of Carter Bloom Consulting, featured speaker, sponsor, mother, survivor, and woman who no longer lowered her eyes. I saw Daniel before he saw me. He stood near the bar in a dark suit that still fit his body but no longer fit his life. He looked older, though only a year had passed. There was tightness around his mouth, a stiffness in his shoulders, the look of a man trying to seem important in a room that had started forgetting him. Vanessa stood beside him, but not close the way she used to. Her white dress was gone. That night she wore pale silver, pretty but nervous, one hand gripping her clutch too tightly. She kept scanning the room, smiling at people who barely smiled back. For a moment, I felt nothing. Not rage. Not jealousy. Not even satisfaction. They looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe they had always been small, and I had only made them large because I was on my knees when I looked at them. Daniel glanced toward the entrance, saw me, and then looked away. I watched the delay in his face. He had seen a woman in a red gown. A woman standing tall. A woman people turned to look at. He had not seen me. Then Vanessa followed his gaze. The color left her face so quickly I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Her lips parted. Her eyes moved from my face to my body, then back again, searching for the woman she had last seen being dragged out of a banquet room in a black dress. The woman crying behind glass. The woman she thought would stay broken enough to make her feel victorious. She touched Daniel's arm and whispered something. Daniel looked annoyed at first, then turned back toward me. This time, he really looked. I saw the moment recognition struck him. It was not romantic. It was not sweet. It was not the slow-motion regret a foolish woman might dream about after heartbreak. It was panic. His eyes widened slightly. His glass lowered. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I held his gaze for 1 second, just long enough to let him understand that I had seen him see me. Then I looked away first. That was the best part. Not his shock. Not Vanessa's fear. The best part was realizing I did not need to keep watching for his reaction. A year ago, his face had controlled my breathing. His approval had decided whether I felt beautiful. His disgust had followed me into mirrors, dressing rooms, meals, and dreams. That night, his regret was just another sound in a crowded room. I walked past him without stopping. Someone from the gala committee greeted me near the front tables and placed a sponsor ribbon on my wrist. "Ms. Carter, we're so honored you're here," she said. Ms. Carter. Not Mrs. Carter. Not Daniel's wife. Not Noah's mother, though I was proudest of that. My own name, standing alone. I could feel Daniel watching as she led me toward the reserved table near the stage. His table was farther back, close enough to see me, too far to reach me. That felt like justice arranged by seating chart. I sat beside 2 women I had admired for years, one who ran a nonprofit for single mothers and another who owned 3 restaurants after rebuilding from bankruptcy. They knew my work. They asked about my clients. They asked about Noah. No one asked about my weight. No one looked at my plate. No one treated my body like the most important fact in the room. When the lights dimmed and the host walked onto the stage, I saw Daniel lean forward. He still did not know why I was there. Vanessa did. I could tell from the way she stared at the program in her hand, frozen on the page where my name was printed in gold letters. The host welcomed everyone, spoke about resilience, rebuilding, and women who turned private devastation into public purpose. Then she smiled toward my table. Our next speaker is not only one of tonight's leading sponsors, she said, but also the founder of a consulting agency that has helped dozens of women-led businesses rebuild after crisis. Please welcome Emma Carter. Applause rose around me. For one strange second, as I stood, I heard another sound in my memory, the soft rip of divorce papers tearing over black frosting. Then it was gone. I walked to the stage with my shoulders back and my head high. Halfway there, I passed Daniel's table. Vanessa stared down at her lap. Daniel looked up at me as if he wanted to speak, as if he expected some private recognition, some sign that the old Emma was still waiting beneath the red dress. I gave him nothing. On stage, the lights were bright enough that I could not see every face clearly, but I could still find him. I could still see the man who once stood beside a funeral cake and announced that the woman he married was dead. I placed my notes on the podium, looked out over the room, and began. 1 year ago, I said, someone threw a funeral for the woman they thought I had become. The ballroom went quiet in a way I could feel against my skin. They believed humiliation would make me small. They believed betrayal would make me disappear. They believed that if they buried my name under shame, I would spend the rest of my life trying to dig myself out for their approval. I paused, letting the silence hold every word. Daniel had gone pale. Vanessa looked like she might be sick. I did not say their names. I did not have to. But sometimes, I continued, the people who think they are burying you are only planting you in the one place where you finally learn how to grow. The applause started softly, then grew until it filled the room. I stood there, not as the woman Daniel had married, not as the woman he had mocked, not as the woman Vanessa had pitted while stealing from her, but as someone neither of them had ever truly known. Someone who had stopped asking to be chosen and had chosen herself so completely that the whole room could feel it. And from the stage, under the lights, wearing the red gown I had once believed my body did not deserve, I looked at Daniel one last time and smiled. Not because I wanted him back. Because at last, he understood what he had buried. After my speech, I expected Daniel to follow me. Men like Daniel do not chase because they love. They chase because something they threw away suddenly looks valuable in someone else's light. I had barely stepped off the stage when people began coming toward me, not with pity, but with respect. Women I had never met held my hand and told me they understood. Business owners asked for my card. The director of the foundation hugged me and whispered, "You have no idea how many people needed to hear that tonight." I smiled, answered questions, accepted congratulations, and felt Daniel's eyes burning into the side of my face the entire time. A year earlier, his attention would have made me nervous. That night, it felt like background noise. Vanessa disappeared first. I saw her slip out through the side doors, her silver dress flashing under the chandelier light, her face tight with the kind of humiliation she had once enjoyed watching on mine. Daniel stayed. Of course he stayed. He waited until I was alone near the terrace doors, holding a glass of water and looking out at the city lights below. Then I heard his voice behind me. Emma. One word. My name. But he said it differently now. Not with disgust. Not with impatience. With hunger. I turned slowly. Up close, Daniel looked worse than he had from across the ballroom. The expensive suit could not hide the exhaustion around his eyes. His smile tried to be charming, but it landed somewhere between panic and regret. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked at my face, my hair, my dress, my body, my bare left hand, and I watched him realize that every part of me had become unavailable to him. You look, he stopped, swallowed, and tried again. You look incredible. I almost laughed. Not because the compliment meant nothing, but because it meant exactly what it had always meant coming from him. Daniel had never loved me more when I was healthier, safer, stronger, or at peace. He loved me more when other people admired me. He loved me more when I looked like proof that he had once owned something beautiful. Thank you, I said. My voice was calm enough to surprise even me. He stepped closer. Your speech was powerful. It was honest. His eyes flickered. Was it about me? I looked at him for a long second. If you recognize yourself in it, that is not my problem. His jaw tightened, but he controlled it quickly. Daniel had always been good at becoming soft when anger stopped working. I deserved that, he said. I deserved a lot of what you said. I waited. He seemed unsettled by my silence, as if he had expected me to rush in and reassure him that he was not a monster, that he had made mistakes, that deep down he was still good. The old Emma would have done that. She would have protected his feelings from the truth of his own behavior. This Emma simply watched him stand inside the discomfort he had earned. I made mistakes, he continued. Terrible mistakes. Vanessa was a mistake. The dinner was, he looked away, as if even now he did not want to say it plainly. It got out of hand. That was the first crack in my calm. Not enough to break me, but enough to sharpen my voice. Out of hand? He looked back at me. I know it was cruel. No, Daniel. Cruel is saying something awful during a fight. Cruel is losing your temper. What you did was planned. You booked the room. You invited guests. You ordered a cake. You told people to wear black. You brought our son. You handed me divorce papers beside a funeral display and then tried to use my reaction to take custody of him. The color drained from his face. He glanced around, terrified someone might hear. That was Daniel exactly. Not ashamed that he had done it. Afraid that others might remember. I was angry, he said. I was confused. I felt like I had lost you. You did not lose me, I said. You punished me for surviving childbirth in a body you did not want to look at. He flinched, and for one satisfying second, I saw the words land. Then he reached for my hand. I stepped back before his fingers touched me. The movement was small, but it stopped him like a wall. Don't, I said. Daniel lowered his hand slowly. I miss you. There it was. The sentence I had once begged God to hear from him. Months ago, I would have fallen apart for those 3 words. I would have asked what he missed. I would have searched his face for proof that the man I loved had come back. But standing there in that red dress, with my own name printed in gold in the gala program, with my son safe at home and my bank account finally mine, all I felt was tired. No, you don't. Emma. You miss access, I said. You miss the woman who made you look better than you were. You miss the money you thought you could control. You miss having someone in the house who absorbed your cruelty and still made dinner. You miss having a wife you could insult until she became too ashamed to leave. His expression twisted. That's not fair. Neither was a funeral cake. He looked down, breathing hard. For a moment, I thought he might finally say something true without dressing it up. Instead, he whispered, Vanessa left. I should have known that was coming. Daniel had not followed me because his soul had awakened. He had followed me because the woman he chose after burying me had stopped making him feel like a winner. She said everything changed after court, he continued. After the videos, after the custody ruling, after people started talking. She said she couldn't live under the shadow of what happened. She helped create the shadow. I know. His voice broke just enough to sound real. I know that now. She was jealous of you. She poisoned everything. She made me believe you had given up. I stared at him, almost impressed by how naturally he reached for the nearest woman to blame. First I was the problem. Then Vanessa. Never him. Never the man who had stood at the center of it all, champagne in hand, smiling while his wife was humiliated in front of their child. Vanessa did not make you point at my body, I said. She did not make you keep Noah from me. She did not make you call me dead in a room full of people. She may have handed you the match, Daniel, but you were the one who enjoyed watching me burn. His eyes filled with tears then, and I hated that some old wounded part of me still noticed. Not because I wanted him. Because I remembered how badly I had once wanted those tears to mean I mattered. I was wrong, he said. I was so wrong. I look at you now and I don't understand how I could have been so blind. You were not blind. You were comfortable being cruel when you thought I had nowhere to go. He stepped closer again, desperate now. Then let me make it right. Please. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll apologize publicly. I'll tell everyone what really happened. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't shut me out completely. I looked through the terrace glass at the ballroom behind him. People were still laughing, networking, dancing under warm light. Somewhere inside that room, my new life was waiting for me. A year earlier, Daniel had closed doors between me and my son while he celebrated my pain. Now he stood on the wrong side of the door, asking to be let back into a life he had tried to destroy. You cannot make it right, I said softly. You can only face what it cost you. His face changed then. Not because of my words, but because he understood there was something more. Daniel had always sensed power shifts the way sharks sense blood. What does that mean? He asked. Before I could answer, Mr. Lawson, one of the foundation board members, approached us from the side. He was also the senior partner at the investment firm Daniel had been chasing for months, the firm Daniel needed to refinance his failing company after the divorce exposed his debts. Mr. Lawson smiled at me first. Emma, sorry to interrupt. The board is ready whenever you are. Daniel looked between us. Board? Mr. Lawson turned to him politely. Daniel. I didn't realize you two were speaking. Daniel straightened, instantly trying to recover his business face. Of course. Emma and I were just catching up. Mr. Lawson's expression cooled slightly. I see. Then he looked back at me. We'll need your final approval before moving forward with the acquisition package. Daniel froze. I watched the words hit him one by one. Final approval. Acquisition package. Me. For months, Daniel had been trying to save his company by selling a controlling interest to a private investment group. What he did not know was that one of my clients, the same women-led fund I had helped restructure, had become the lead buyer. What he did not know was that I had been brought in to review the operations, the debt exposure, and the leadership risk. What he did not know was that the woman he once called dead weight was now one of the people deciding whether his business deserved to live. Emma, he said slowly, what is he talking about? I looked at him, and this time I did smile. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Just clearly. Your company, Daniel. The one you built with my money, damaged with your arrogance, and tried to protect by hiding assets during our divorce. His face went gray. You're involved. I was asked to review the acquisition. You can't be serious. I was very serious. That's why the report is so thorough. Mr. Lawson, sensing the tension but choosing professionalism, gave a small nod and stepped away. Daniel waited until he was out of earshot before lowering his voice. Emma, please. Don't do this. There it was again. Please. Only now it was not about love. It was about consequences. Do what? I asked. Tell the truth? That company is all I have left. No, I said. It is what you have left after you gambled with everything else. He shook his head, panic stripping away the charm completely. If that deal falls apart, I'm ruined. I thought of the restaurant. The black cake. The way he had said, watch me, when I told him he could not keep my son from me. I thought of sitting on the curb with empty arms while they celebrated inside. I thought of every morning I had rebuilt myself from pieces while he told people I was bitter, unstable, vindictive. And then I realized something almost peaceful. I did not need to ruin Daniel. He had done that himself. I had only stopped protecting him from the evidence. My recommendation is already submitted, I said. It is factual, documented, and fair. More than you ever were to me. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger, and maybe he was. Not because I had changed beyond recognition, but because he had never bothered to know me beyond what I gave him. I loved you, he whispered, I shook my head. No, Daniel. You loved being loved by me. There is a difference. His eyes moved over me again, slower this time, grieving not the woman he lost, but the life attached to her. Can we at least talk? We just did. I turned to leave, but he said the one thing I knew he had been holding back. I want my family back. I stopped. For 1 second, the old pain stirred. Family. That word still had power because it belonged to Noah. It belonged to the life I had wanted, the home I had tried to save, the version of us I had buried long before Daniel threw his party. I turned back. You had a family, I said. You invited people to watch you destroy it. His face crumpled. Emma, please. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing left that could pull me backward. A year ago, you told everyone the woman you married was dead. My voice was quiet now. You were right about one thing. She is. But she did not die because she gained weight. She died because she finally understood that being loved badly can feel worse than being alone. I stepped past him toward the ballroom. This time, Daniel did not follow immediately. He stood on the terrace, surrounded by city lights, looking like a man who had just arrived at a funeral and realized the coffin was his own. Daniel's company did not collapse in one dramatic explosion. It happened the way most false things collapse, first one crack, then another, until everyone who had been pretending not to notice suddenly acted like they had seen the damage all along. The acquisition deal did not move forward under Daniel's leadership. My report did not include revenge, insults, or emotion. It included numbers, hidden debts, unauthorized transfers, inconsistent records, and the kind of leadership risk no serious investor wanted to inherit. That was enough. Within 2 weeks, his board demanded answers. Within a month, 2 major clients walked away. Within 6 weeks, Daniel was no longer the man standing in front of glass conference rooms pretending he had built everything alone. He was a liability. I heard about most of it through lawyers, filings, and the kind of people who suddenly felt comfortable telling the truth once Daniel no longer looked powerful. Margaret called me after the news became public. I did not answer. She left a voicemail saying I had destroyed her son out of bitterness, that a good woman would never use private pain to ruin a family. I saved the voicemail, then sent it to my lawyer, because by then saving evidence had become as natural as breathing. Vanessa tried a different approach. She came to my office one rainy afternoon without an appointment, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was gray. My assistant asked if I wanted security to escort her out, and for a moment, I almost said yes. Then I looked through the glass wall at the woman who had once walked into my humiliation wearing white, and I realized I was no longer afraid of being in the same room with her. Fear requires power, and Vanessa had none left over me. I let her in. She stood in front of my desk, thinner, paler, less polished than I remembered. The confidence she used to wear around Daniel was gone. Without my pain to stand on, she looked strangely ordinary. Emma, she said, I know I'm the last person you want to see. I waited. She twisted her hands together. I wanted to apologize. The old me might have softened at that. The old me might have needed the apology so badly that I would have accepted any version of it, even a rotten one. But healing had taught me to listen not only to what people said, but to what they still refused to name. For what? I asked. Vanessa blinked. For everything. That is not an apology. That is a fog. Her face tightened. For Daniel. For the dinner. For Noah. For hurting you. You did not hurt me by accident, I said. You studied me. You held my baby while I cried to you. You repeated my insecurities to my husband. You stood in a white dress at a funeral he threw for our marriage. You watched them drag me away from my son. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they did not move me. Daniel manipulated me, she whispered. He told me you had given up. He told me he was trapped. He told me he loved me. And you believed him because it made you feel chosen. She looked down, and that was when I knew I had finally said the thing she could not deny. Vanessa had not betrayed me because Daniel was irresistible. She betrayed me because my weakness made her feel strong, my marriage made her feel victorious, and my body became the excuse she used to convince herself she was not cruel. I lost everything too, she said. My job, my friends, Daniel. People look at me like I'm a monster. I leaned back in my chair. That must be hard. She looked up quickly, searching my face for softness. I gave her none. But it is not my responsibility to make your consequences feel less lonely. She started crying then, really crying, but I had a meeting in 15 minutes and a son waiting for me at home. That was the difference between us now. Vanessa was still standing in the ruins of what she had done, asking the person she betrayed to help her feel human again. I had already rebuilt something too valuable to let her grief walk through it with dirty shoes. I hope you become better than what you did, I told her. But you will not do it inside my life. Then I stood, opened the office door, and let her understand the conversation was over. Daniel tried one last time 2 months later. Not at a gala, not in a ballroom, not where people could see him perform regret. He came to my house on a Sunday evening while Noah was asleep upstairs and the kitchen smelled like cinnamon because I had been baking muffins for his daycare class. I saw Daniel through the camera before he rang the bell. For a second, looking at him standing on the porch where he used to live, I felt the ghost of another life pass through me. There had been a time when that sight would have meant home. Now it looked like a stranger standing too close to my peace. I opened the door but left the chain locked. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Can we talk? He asked. His voice was hoarse. He looked like he had not slept well in weeks. Maybe he had not. About Noah, contact my attorney. This isn't about custody. Then no. I started to close the door, but he put one hand against it, not pushing hard enough to be threatening, just enough to remind me of the man who still thought access could be negotiated if he looked wounded. Please, Emma. I stopped, not because he deserved it, but because I wanted to know if there was anything left in me that could still be pulled backward. There was not. I went by the old restaurant today, he said. The one from that night. My hand tightened on the door. Why? I don't know. Maybe because I can't stop thinking about it. He swallowed. They changed the banquet room. New paint. New lights. You'd never know what happened there. I looked at him through the narrow opening. I know what happened there. I do too. His eyes filled again, but I no longer mistook tears for transformation. I thought I was proving I had moved on. I thought I was showing everyone I could still have the life I deserved. You were showing everyone who you were. He nodded slowly. I know that now. The words were closer to truth than anything he had said before, but truth arriving late does not undo the years it spent missing. I saw pictures of you and Noah, he said. From his birthday. My body went still. Where? Claire posted one. Just one. You were holding him near a cake. He smiled faintly, sadly. You looked happy. We are. That hurt him. I could see it. Not because he hated our happiness, maybe, but because he finally understood that happiness had continued without him. There was writing on the cake, he said. New life. I said nothing. Was that about me? He asked. I almost closed the door then, not from anger, but from exhaustion. Men like Daniel always think they are the center of the story, even in chapters written after they leave. No, I said. That was about us. Us. Noah and me. The family Daniel had tried to fracture and failed to erase. Daniel looked down at his hands. Do you ever miss me? It was such a small question from a man who had once filled entire rooms with his certainty. I could have said no and ended it quickly. But that would have been too simple, and the truth mattered more now. I miss who I thought you were, I said. I miss the family I tried to build. I missed the version of my life where Noah grew up with two parents who loved each other kindly. I missed the peace I kept trying to create while you kept setting fires. But you? I shook my head. No. I do not miss being afraid of your face when I entered a room. Daniel cried then. Quietly. His shoulders lowered like something inside him had finally understood there was no performance left that could win me back. I'm sorry, he whispered. For the first time, the apology sounded like it was not asking for anything. That made it better. It still did not make it enough. I hope you are, I said. For Noah's sake. I hope one day you become someone he does not have to recover from. Then I closed the door. I locked it. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence on the other side, and realized my hands were steady. Upstairs, Noah stirred in his sleep, and the small sound pulled me away from the past more gently than any revenge ever could. A week later, the divorce was finalized. I walked out of the courthouse with full primary custody, my house protected, my finances restored, and my name legally returned to me like something precious that had been misplaced but never truly lost. Claire was beside me, crying harder than I was. My lawyer shook my hand. The sun was bright enough to make the courthouse steps glow. Daniel stood across the parking lot with Margaret, looking smaller than either of them had ever looked in my memory. Margaret glared at me as if hate could still make me shrink. It could not. Daniel looked at Noah in my arms, then at me, and for once he did not come closer. Maybe he had finally learned that some doors close forever. That evening, I took Noah to the small bakery that had become one of my first clients. The owner hugged me when I walked in and brought out the cake I had ordered. It was simple, vanilla with soft blue frosting, little gold stars around the edges, and 2 words written across the top, New Life. Noah clapped when he saw it, though he was still too young to understand why I laughed and cried at the same time. I thought of the black cake. Rip our marriage. I thought of the room full of people dressed like mourners, Daniel's champagne glass, Vanessa's white dress, Margaret's black veil, my son crying behind closed doors. For a long time, I thought that night was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Maybe it was. But it was also the night I stopped begging to be loved by people who only valued me when I was easy to control. I did not become beautiful because I lost weight. I became beautiful because shame stopped living in my posture. I became strong because I stopped using survival as an apology. I became rich not only in money, though I had built that too, but in peace, in choice, in mornings that belonged to me, in a child who reached for me without hesitation, in mirrors that no longer sounded like Daniel. Before bed, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and took out the black veil Margaret had handed me that night. I had kept it for a year, folded neatly beneath old papers and court documents, waiting for the moment when looking at it no longer made my chest tighten. That moment had finally come. I carried it outside to the fire pit in Claire's backyard, the same place where I had spent so many nights crying when the legal battle first began. Noah was asleep inside. The sky was clear. The air smelled like summer grass. I placed the veil into the flames and watched the edges curl, darken, and disappear. It did not feel dramatic. It felt quiet. Clean. Final. Daniel had been right about one thing. The woman he married was gone. But he was wrong about why. She had not died because her body changed. She had not died because she became a mother. She had not died because he stopped wanting her. She died because one night, in a room full of black candles and cruel people, she finally saw the grave they had prepared for her and decided not to climb in. The woman who rose from that night did not need Daniel to regret losing her. She did not need Vanessa to envy her. She did not need Margaret to approve of her. She had a son sleeping safely upstairs, a name no one else owned, a life she had rebuilt with her own hands, and a future no one was invited to bury. 1 year after my husband held a funeral for our marriage because I got fat, he begged for the woman he buried. But by then, I was no longer buried. I was blooming.